The Galactic Summit was the most important meeting in the universe. It took place once every 10 years, bringing together leaders from different species. It was held on Zyros Prime, the homeworld of the Zyrian Dominion, one of the most powerful and intelligent civilizations in the galaxy. For the first time in history, humans were invited to the summit. Many alien races still saw them as a young and reckless species, but Earth had proven itself in diplomacy, science, and war. Now, they had earned their place among the stars. Captain Ethan Voss stepped into the grand hall of the summit, his dark blue uniform crisp and perfect. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the sight of hundreds of alien delegates. The air smelled strange, a mix of chemicals and perfumes from different species. Some delegates had smooth, shining skin. Others had fur, feathers, or even exoskeletons. The room was alive with conversation in 100 different languages, but thanks to universal translators, communication was smooth. As Ethan moved forward, he felt the weight of many eyes on him. Humans were still a mystery to most of the galaxy. They were smaller and physically weaker than some species, but had proven themselves to be fierce, adaptable, and full of surprises. Then he saw her. Standing near a high-tech console was a tall, elegant alien woman with smooth, silver-blue skin. Her hair was dark violet, flowing down her back in gentle waves. Her eyes, a deep shade of gold, studied him with intense curiosity. She wore a form-fitting suit covered in glowing patterns, the traditional attire of a Zyrian scientist. She approached him, moving with the grace of a dancer. Ethan kept his posture relaxed but alert. He had learned that Zyrians were a logical and intelligent species. They believed in calculated decisions and rarely acted without purpose. "Captain Ethan Voss," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I am Dr. Vela Quinn, chief scientist of the Zyrian Research Institute." Ethan nodded, offering a polite smile. "A pleasure to meet you, Dr. Vela Quinn. It's an honor to attend this summit." She tilted her head slightly, a Zyrian gesture of interest. "I have studied your species for many years. You humans are unusual." Ethan chuckled. "We get that a lot." Vela Quinn did not laugh. Instead, she stepped closer, her golden eyes fixed on his. Ethan had faced warlords and assassins before, but he had never felt so intensely studied. It was like she was looking into his very soul. "I have read reports on your emotional nature," she continued. "Your ability to form deep connections, your unpredictable behavior, your survival instincts." Ethan crossed his arms. "That's what makes us human." Vela Quinn nodded slowly. "I must experience it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Experience what, exactly?" She leaned in slightly and whispered, "Human mating." Ethan nearly choked. He had expected political discussions, maybe some debates about intergalactic trade. Not this. Come again," he said, blinking. Vela Quinn's expression remained calm, scientific. "Zyrians reproduce through artificial means. We have not engaged in physical intimacy for over 10,000 years. However, recent studies suggest that human emotional bonding creates a level of loyalty and strategic thinking that cannot be replicated in artificial societies." Ethan cleared his throat. "I see. And you think understanding human intimacy will help your research?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "If human emotions and instincts give your species an advantage, then I must study them firsthand." Ethan took a step back. "Look, I respect science, but this is kind of personal." Vela Quinn watched him carefully. "That is why it is necessary. Humans make decisions not just with logic, but with feeling. This is something the Zyrian people must understand if we are to grow." Ethan let out a breath, trying to process what was happening. He wasn't sure whether to be flattered, confused, or deeply concerned. Was this some kind of test, a diplomatic trap, or was she truly serious? Before he could respond, a loud alarm echoed through the hall. The summit doors slammed shut, and security forces rushed into the room. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing the face of a Crixian warlord. The Crixians were a terrifying insectoid race that had long been enemies of the Dominion. "Attention, weaklings of the summit," the warlord's voice boomed. "The Crixian swarm has begun its attack on your outer colonies. Soon, we will devour your worlds. Surrender or be destroyed." Panic spread among the delegates. Some aliens began shouting. Others activated their communication devices. The Zyrian guard stood firm, but Ethan could see the concern in their normally emotionless faces. Veloquin turned back to Ethan. "This is precisely what I mean," she said. "Your species thrives in chaos. You fight, adapt, and survive. The Zyrians must learn from you before it is too late." Ethan straightened his uniform, his mind now focused. The Crixians had just made a huge mistake. "I think you're about to get your lesson in human nature a lot sooner than expected," he said. Veloquin nodded. "Then let us begin." Ethan Voss had been in difficult situations before. Ambushes, space battles, even political negotiations that felt like wars. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. A Zyrian scientist was standing in front of him, calmly requesting to experience human mating as part of a scientific study. And now, an invasion alarm had turned the summit into a war zone. He took a deep breath, trying to sort out his priorities. First, the Crixians were attacking, which meant that everyone here, humans, Zyrians, and other species, were in danger. Second, Veloquin, the highly intelligent but emotionally detached Zyrian woman, was still watching him with fascination, as if this crisis was just another experiment to observe. "This is not the best time to discuss your research," Ethan said, scanning the summit hall. "We might be under attack." Veloquin tilted her head, her golden eyes unblinking. "That is why this moment is important. Human behavior under stress is a key part of my study." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Of course, leave it to a scientist to see a potential war as an opportunity for research." Before he could respond, a voice crackled over the summit's intercom. "All delegates remain in position. The Zyrian defense fleet is mobilizing. Crixian forces have breached the outer atmosphere." The crowd of alien representatives reacted in different ways. Some delegates were arguing, others were preparing evacuation plans. The Zyrians, however, remained calm. Their logical minds were already calculating possible outcomes. Ethan turned to Veloquin. "What's the Dominion's usual strategy against the Crixians?" "We rely on superior tactics and technology," she replied. "Our fleets are faster and more efficient." "And how has that worked out in the past?" Ethan asked. She hesitated. "We have lost 2 major battles." Ethan sighed. "That's what I thought." The Crixians weren't just strong, they were unpredictable. They didn't follow traditional military strategy. They adapted, learned, and attacked in ways that defied logic. That was why the Zyrians, despite their intelligence, struggled against them. That was why they needed humanity. Ethan placed a hand on his belt, where his pulse pistol was holstered. "We need to do more than just analyze the situation. We need to act." Veloquin's eyes flickered with curiosity. "You believe instinct is more important than logic." "I believe you need both," Ethan said. "And right now, instinct says we're running out of time." Just then, a loud explosion shook the summit hall. The lights flickered. A deep rumble echoed through the structure. Gasps and shouts spread among the delegates. A Zyrian officer rushed toward them. "Dr. Veloquin, the Crixians have deployed ground forces in the city. We must evacuate you immediately." Veloquin remained still. "And what of the summit?" "The Crixians are expected to take control of the area within the hour," the officer said. "Our priority is securing important personnel." Ethan stepped forward. "What about the civilians?" The officer hesitated. "We do not have orders regarding non-military personnel." Ethan clenched his jaw. Of course, the Zyrians would prioritize efficiency over people. "That's not good enough," he said. "If we let the Crixians take control, they won't just capture this summit. They'll turn it into a stronghold." Villaquin studied him. You wish to stay and fight. Ethan smirked. That's a very human thing to do, isn't it? For the first time, something flickered in her golden eyes, not just curiosity, but something deeper. After a moment, she nodded. Then I will observe. Ethan shook his head. No, you're going to help. Before she could respond, another explosion rocked the summit. The main doors burst open, and Crixian warriors stormed inside. The Crixians were massive, standing over 7 feet tall with dark chitinous armor covering their bodies. Their 4 glowing red eyes scanned the room, and their clawed hands gripped energy rifles. The summit fell into chaos. Some delegates ran. Others tried to hide. Xerian security forces engaged, but the Crixians were faster. Blasts of green energy filled the air. Ethan pulled his pistol and fired. His first shot hit a Crixian square in the chest, making it stagger but not fall. Damn tough armor, he muttered. The Crixian turned toward him, hissing. It raised its weapon. But before it could fire, Villaquin moved. She wasn't a soldier, but she was fast. She grabbed a fallen energy beacon from a guard and struck the Crixian across the face. Sparks flew as the alien stumbled. Ethan didn't waste the chance. He aimed and fired again, this time at the soft joint in its neck. The Crixian collapsed. Villaquin looked at the fallen enemy, then at Ethan. You aimed for a weak point. Ethan nodded. Instinct. She exhaled slowly. Fascinating. But there was no time to talk. More Crixians were pushing into the hall. The Xerian security forces were struggling. If they didn't act fast, the summit would fall. Ethan turned to Villaquin. We need to reach the command center. If we can override the summit's defenses, we might stand a chance. She nodded. I will follow your lead. Ethan grinned. Good. Time for your first real lesson in human survival. They ran toward the exit as the battle raged behind them. Ethan Voss sprinted through the corridors of the summit complex, his pulse pistol gripped tightly in his right hand. Behind him, Dr. Villaquin followed with surprising speed, her violet hair flowing as she moved. The walls shook with distant explosions. The Crixians were advancing fast. We need to get to the command center, Ethan said, glancing back at Villaquin. If we can take control of the summit's defense systems, we might be able to push them back. Villaquin nodded. Xerian security systems are highly encrypted, but I can override them if given access. Ethan smirked. That's what I was hoping to hear. They rounded a corner and nearly ran into a group of Xerian soldiers. The armored warriors raised their weapons before recognizing Ethan and Villaquin. Dr. Villaquin, one of them said, you should not be here. The summit is under siege. I am aware, she replied. We are heading to the command center. One of the soldiers shook his head. The Crixians have already breached the outer sections. Our forces are overwhelmed. Evacuation is the only logical choice. Ethan stepped forward. That's exactly what they want. If we abandon this place, the Crixians will use it as a base. We have to fight. The soldier hesitated. Xerians were brilliant strategists, but they lacked human instinct. Their logic told them to retreat in the face of overwhelming odds. Villaquin studied Ethan for a moment, then turned to the soldiers. He is correct. If we surrender this location, we will lose more than just a building. We will lose our advantage. The soldiers looked at one another before nodding. We will hold the corridor, one said. Go. Ethan and Villaquin pushed forward. The battle outside. As they ran, Ethan glanced at a nearby holographic display. It showed the battle outside. Xerian defense forces clashing with Crixian warriors in the city streets. The Xerians had advanced energy weapons and precision targeting, but the Crixians fought like a swarm. They adapted, attacked from unexpected angles, and used overwhelming numbers. Ethan frowned. He had seen this kind of battle before, a war of attrition. If the Xerians stuck to their usual tactics, they would lose. Villaquin seemed to notice his expression. You disapprove of our strategy. Ethan nodded. Your people fight with efficiency. That's good against most enemies. But the Crixians don't follow the rules. They change, they adapt. You have to be unpredictable. Villequin raised an eyebrow. You are suggesting we abandon logic. Ethan smirked. No, I'm saying you need to think like a human. We don't just fight with our minds. We fight with our instincts. She was silent for a moment, considering his words. Then they reached the command center. The command center. The doors slid open, revealing a large room filled with holographic displays and control panels. A few Zirian officers worked at their stations, but the room was in disarray. The Crixians had already disabled some of the security systems. Villequin rushed to a terminal and began typing rapidly. I will attempt to reactivate the automated defenses. Ethan moved to a nearby screen. It displayed a full map of the summit complex. The Crixians were advancing toward the main power core. If they reached it, they could disable the entire station. Ethan cursed. They're going for the power grid. Villequin glanced at him. Then we must stop them. Before Ethan could respond, the doors burst open. A Crixian warrior lunged into the room, its massive form blocking the exit. Its 4 glowing eyes locked onto Ethan as it raised a serrated blade. Ethan fired first. His pulse shot hit the Crixian's shoulder, making it snarl in pain. But it didn't fall. It charged. Ethan barely had time to dodge as the alien's blade slashed past him, cutting through a console. Sparks flew. Villequin grabbed a fallen energy rifle from the ground and aimed. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then fired. The shot struck the Crixian in the side, making it stagger. Ethan saw his chance. He lunged forward, grabbing the alien's arm and twisting it. With a grunt, he shoved his pistol under its jaw and pulled the trigger. The Crixian collapsed. Villequin stared at the fallen enemy, then at Ethan. You acted without hesitation. Ethan exhaled. That's how you survive a war. She studied him for a moment, then turned back to the console. Her hands moved faster now. Ethan watched her. Something had changed. For the first time, she wasn't just analyzing. She was acting. The turning point. A voice crackled over the intercom. Security systems coming back online. Ethan checked the screen and saw Zirian turrets activating across the complex. The Crixians, caught off guard, were now being pushed back. Villequin's fingers moved across the console. I am redirecting power to the outer defense grid. Outside, the city's energy shields flickered, then strengthened. The Crixians' advance slowed as Zirian reinforcements arrived. Ethan grinned. They had just turned the battle in their favor. Villequin turned to him. I see now. Strategy alone is not enough. Instinct, adaptability. This is what makes humans different. Ethan smirked. Took you long enough to figure that out. Before she could respond, another alert flashed on the screen. A Crixian warship was descending toward the summit. Ethan's expression hardened. Looks like they're not done yet. Villequin nodded. Then we fight. The command center was buzzing with energy as Ethan Voss and Dr. Villequin stared at the holographic display. The Crixian warship was descending fast, its dark silhouette cutting through the sky. If it landed, the enemy would deploy hundreds of warriors, and this battle would turn into a massacre. Ethan clenched his jaw. We need to stop that ship before it touches the ground. Villequin's fingers moved quickly across the console. I am rerouting all available defense turrets to target it, but they may not be enough. Crixian warships are heavily armored. Ethan checked his pulse pistol, his mind racing. They needed a bigger weapon. His eyes landed on a flashing section of the screen. The summit's experimental energy cannon. What's this? He asked, pointing at the glowing icon. Villequin's gaze followed his hand. That is an unfinished planetary defense system. It was meant to be completed next cycle. It is non-operational. Ethan smirked. Not if we fix it. Villequin hesitated. It has never been tested. The risk factor is better than the alternative, Ethan finished. Unless you want the Crixians to turn this place into a war camp. She exhaled. Very well. The cannon's control room is located in the lower levels. We will need to reach it manually. A deep rumble shook the building. The Crixians were still advancing. Time was running out. Ethan holstered his pistol and grabbed a fallen soldier's rifle. Let's move. Into the lower levels. The halls were eerily silent as they moved deeper underground. Unlike the battle raging above, this section was abandoned. But that didn't mean it was safe. Ethan took the lead, his weapon raised. Vila Quinn followed, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. I must admit, she said, this is not how I expected this summit to proceed. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, what were you expecting? She hesitated. Debates, scientific exchanges, a structured environment. Ethan shook his head. War doesn't work that way. As they rounded a corner, he suddenly stopped. Something was wrong. The lights flickered. The air felt heavy. Vila Quinn noticed it too. A disturbance. Ethan narrowed his eyes. We're not alone. A low growl echoed from the shadows. Then they attacked. 3 Crixian assassins lunged from the darkness, their black armor blending with the shadows. Unlike the warriors above, these were elite killers, trained in silent combat. Ethan reacted fast. He dodged the first strike, bringing up his rifle and firing point blank. The shot hit the Crixian's chest, sending it crashing into the wall. But the second one was already moving. It slashed at him with a curved blade, forcing Ethan to jump back. Vila Quinn, instead of retreating, did something unexpected. She stepped forward. She twisted her body, avoiding a Crixian blade by inches. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a fallen baton and struck the assassin's leg. The alien stumbled. Ethan didn't waste the chance. He fired twice, taking the Crixian down. The last assassin lunged at Vila Quinn. Her golden eyes widened. She tried to move, but the Crixian was faster. Its claws reached for her throat. Ethan tackled it midair. They crashed to the ground. The Crixian snarled, trying to throw Ethan off. But Ethan was faster. He pressed his rifle against the alien's neck joint and fired. The assassin twitched, then went still. Ethan exhaled, rolling off the body. You okay? Vila Quinn stared at him. You shielded me. Ethan sat up, smirking. That's what humans do. For a moment, she seemed unsure of how to respond. Then she simply nodded. We must keep moving. The power of humanity. They finally reached the control room. The massive energy cannon loomed above them, connected to a complex system of cables and generators. But it was offline. She was still holding the rifle, her fingers gripping it tightly. Her breathing was uneven. Ethan smiled. Not bad, Doc. She blinked, then slowly lowered the weapon. I acted. Ethan smirked. Welcome to the fight. Before she could reply, the final Crixian warrior roared and charged toward her. Ethan spun around, raising his rifle. Too late. The Crixian was already on her. Vila Quinn's golden eyes widened as the alien raised its blade. Ethan reacted on instinct. He lunged forward, shoving her aside. The Crixian's blade slashed across Ethan's side, but he ignored the pain. He raised his rifle and fired 3 times into the Crixian's chest. The alien fell. Ethan stumbled, pressing a hand to his side. Blood seeped through his uniform. Vila Quinn caught him before he fell. Ethan, you are injured, she said, concern in her voice. Ethan chuckled weakly. Just a scratch. She shook her head. It is more than a scratch. Before she could do anything else, the console beeped. Vila Quinn turned. The cannon is fully charged. Ethan forced himself to stand. Then let's end this. Firing the cannon. Vila Quinn moved back to the console. Her fingers flew over the controls. The Crixian warship is directly above us, she said. This shot must be precise. Ethan wiped blood from his hand. Then don't miss. She activated the cannon. Outside, a massive energy coil began to glow. Electricity crackled through the cables, sending waves of power into the main barrel. The Crixian warship detected the energy spike and began to change course. Too late, Ethan muttered. With a deafening boom, the cannon fired. A massive blue energy beam shot into the sky, tearing through the clouds. It struck the Crixian warship dead center. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the ship exploded. A shockwave rippled through the sky, sending debris raining down. The remaining Crixians on the ground stopped fighting. Their warship was gone. Their advantage was lost. They began retreating. Ethan exhaled. That's right. Run. Velaquin watched the battlefield on the screen. We won. Ethan smirked. Of course we did. She turned to him. Because of you. He shrugged. Team effort. She studied him for a moment, then said something unexpected. I understand now. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Understand what? She stepped closer, her golden eyes locked on his. What makes humans special? Ethan blinked. But before he could respond, the alarms blared again. A new threat was approaching. Ethan sighed. Of course, it's never that easy. Velaquin nodded. Then we fight. Ethan grinned. Now you're getting it. The alarms blared through the control room, their sharp wails echoing off the metal walls. Ethan gritted his teeth, pressing a hand against his bleeding side. The wound burned, but he had no time to worry about it now. Velaquin's fingers flew over the console, her golden eyes scanning the data. Her expression turned grim. This is bad, she murmured. Ethan smirked. Doc, everything today has been bad. Be specific. She turned to him. A second Crixian warship is approaching. Ethan's grin faded. Of course, they had backup. How long? He asked. Velaquin's voice was calm, but he could hear the urgency underneath. 6 minutes. Ethan exhaled. That's not a lot of time. The planetary cannon needs to recharge, she continued. At least 20 minutes. Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair. They were out of options. The first warship had been destroyed, but this second one would land before they could fire again. That meant only one thing. They had to stop it before it reached the ground. He looked at Velaquin. Is there any way to overload the cannon? Fire it early. She shook her head. If we do that, it will explode. The entire facility will be destroyed. Ethan sighed. That's a no, then. He turned toward the doorway, gripping his rifle. He was exhausted, injured, and running on pure adrenaline. But he wasn't going to stop now. Velaquin stepped beside him. What is the plan? Ethan smirked. We improvise. The battle outside. Ethan and Velaquin rushed out of the control room, stepping into the war-torn battlefield. Smoke and fire filled the air, and the ground was littered with wreckage from destroyed vehicles and fallen soldiers. The remaining Crixians were regrouping, preparing for their reinforcements to arrive. Their red eyes glowed with determination. Ethan lifted his rifle. They couldn't let these warriors gain control of the summit again. A group of Crixians spotted them and charged forward, weapons raised. Here we go, Ethan muttered. He fired first, dropping one enemy with a clean headshot. Velaquin, standing beside him, raised her energy rifle. She hesitated for only a moment before pulling the trigger. The shot hit a Crixian in the chest, sending it stumbling backward. Ethan glanced at her. Nice shot. She exhaled. I did not think I would have to do this today. Ethan grinned. War has a way of ruining plans. They kept moving, ducking behind cover as the Crixians returned fire. A nearby explosion shook the ground, sending debris flying. Ethan covered Velaquin with his arm as dust filled the air. We can't stay out here, she shouted. Ethan scanned the battlefield and spotted an abandoned Crixian transport. It was armored, fast, and had just enough firepower to cause trouble. "Think you can drive that thing?" he asked. Veloquin glanced at the vehicle. "I can try." "That's good enough." They sprinted toward the transport. Ethan covered her as she climbed into the cockpit. "I am unfamiliar with Crixian controls," she admitted. Ethan chuckled, still firing at the approaching enemies. "Just press buttons until something works." She gave him a look but started flipping switches. The vehicle rumbled to life. The onboard turret whirred, locking onto enemy targets. "Ethan," she called. "Get in." Ethan didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the side, gripping the mounted turret. Veloquin hit the accelerator. The transport lurched forward, speeding through the battlefield. Crixians dived out of the way as Veloquin drove straight through enemy lines. Ethan opened fire with the turret, the heavy blasts tearing through Crixian defenses. "This is fun," he shouted over the chaos. Veloquin's expression was tense, but there was a glint of excitement in her golden eyes. "I prefer my lab, but this is acceptable." Ethan laughed. "We'll make a soldier out of you yet." Stopping the second warship, they raced toward the edge of the battlefield, where the second Crixian warship was approaching. The massive shadow of the vessel darkened the sky as it prepared to land. If it touched the ground, hundreds of reinforcements would flood the summit. "We have to stop it now," Ethan shouted. Veloquin scanned the sky. "There are defense turrets on the ridge. They were inactive before, but I believe I can reactivate them." Ethan nodded. "Do it." She skidded the transport to a stop near an old communications tower. Ethan jumped off as she ran to the controls. "I need time," she called. Ethan turned to face the battlefield. The Crixians had noticed what they were doing. A group of heavily armed warriors began advancing toward them. Ethan checked his ammo. "Come on then," he muttered. The first enemy lunged at him. Ethan dodged, bringing up his rifle and firing at close range. The second warrior swung at him with a blade, but Ethan blocked with the butt of his weapon and kicked the alien back. More were coming. "Veloquin," he yelled. "Almost there," she responded. Ethan was surrounded now. His breath was heavy, his muscles burning. He fought like hell, taking down enemy after enemy, but he was reaching his limit. Then, the turrets powered up. Veloquin slammed the activation switch. The defense cannons roared to life, unleashing a storm of firepower at the approaching warship. The Crixian vessel tried to evade, but it was too late. A direct hit to the engines sent the ship spiraling out of control. It veered sharply, flames consuming its hull, before it crashed into the mountainside with an earth-shaking explosion. The remaining Crixians on the ground stared in shock. Their reinforcements were gone. The battle was over. Ethan leaned against a broken console, breathing heavily. He turned to Veloquin. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it." For a moment, they just stood there, watching the burning remains of the Crixian warship. Then, Veloquin stepped closer. "I have learned much about humans today," she said softly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." She studied him. "You fight when others would run. You endure when others would surrender. And you protect, even when it costs you." Ethan smirked. "That's just what we do." Veloquin tilted her head. "It is fascinating." She stepped even closer. Before Ethan could react, the summit's emergency sirens blared again. Another threat was approaching. Ethan sighed. "You've got to be kidding me." Veloquin nodded. "It appears. Our work is not finished." Ethan grinned. "Then let's get to it." The emergency sirens wailed again, cutting through the smoke-filled air. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead, his body aching from the battle. The Crixians had been defeated, their warships destroyed, but something else was coming. Veloquin scanned the damaged control panel, her golden eyes narrowing. "There is a new energy signature approaching fast," she said. Ethan frowned. "More Crixians." She shook her head. "No, This is something different. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. Different never meant good. A low rumble echoed through the valley, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Ethan turned his gaze to the sky. Something massive was descending. Through the thick clouds, a dark, metallic shape emerged. A sleek, heavily armored ship, far more advanced than the Crixian vessels. It had no visible markings, no symbols of any known empire. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Who the hell are they? Velaquin's voice was quiet. I do not know. The ship hovered above the battlefield, casting an eerie shadow. Then, with a hiss of escaping air, a hatch opened beneath it. A single figure descended, slowly floating down on a field of gravitational energy. It wasn't a Crixian. It wasn't even humanoid. The figure was tall and slender, its body wrapped in shimmering silver armor that seemed to shift like liquid metal. Its face was hidden behind a smooth, featureless mask, and it moved with an unnatural grace. Ethan raised his rifle. I don't like this. Velaquin tensed beside him. Be careful, Ethan. The alien touched the ground silently. For a moment, it simply stood there, observing the ruins of the battlefield. Then it turned its head, looking directly at Ethan. A strange, mechanical voice spoke. Human. Ethan took a cautious step forward. Yeah? Who's asking? The alien tilted its head, as if studying him. We have been watching. Ethan's fingers tightened around his rifle. That doesn't make me feel better. The alien ignored his sarcasm. Your kind is unique. Ethan exchanged a glance with Velaquin. I get that a lot. The alien slowly raised one hand. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly, Ethan's weapon was ripped from his hands by an unseen force. It hovered in the air before dropping to the ground. Velaquin's eyes widened. Telekinetic control. Ethan stepped back, his instincts screaming danger. Yeah, that's a neat trick, but I prefer my gun. The alien took a step forward. Your species possesses resilience, defiance, adaptability. Ethan crossed his arms. We also don't like being studied like lab rats. The alien paused. A test. Ethan's muscles tensed. What? The alien's voice remained emotionless. We wanted to see if humanity was worthy. Ethan's patience was wearing thin. Worthy of what? The alien raised a hand, and suddenly, the sky cracked with energy. From the hovering ship, a column of blue light shot down, striking the battlefield. The ground rippled and burned, turning solid rock into molten lava. Ethan cursed and grabbed Velaquin, pulling her behind cover. The heat was unbearable for a moment before the energy blast faded. The alien lowered its hand. Ethan stared in shock at the smoldering crater left behind. The alien spoke again. Worthy of survival. Ethan's heart pounded. You were testing us this whole time. The alien nodded. The Crixians failed. They were strong, but without purpose. Your kind, however. It took another step forward. You are something else. Ethan clenched his fists. So what now? You just decide whether we live or die. The alien paused. Then, slowly, it turned away. The decision is made. A low hum filled the air as it began to ascend back to the ship. Ethan's frustration boiled over. Hey, you can't just show up, destroy half the battlefield, and walk away. The alien looked down at him one last time. You will see us again, human. Then, with a final burst of energy, it vanished into the ship. The massive vessel rose into the sky, then disappeared into the clouds without a trace. Ethan and Velaquin stood in stunned silence. Finally, Velaquin spoke. What just happened? Ethan exhaled. I think we just got judged by something a lot bigger than the Crixians. Velaquin's golden eyes darkened, and Ethan smirked, despite the chaos around him. And apparently, we passed. Velaquin watched the empty sky. For now. Ethan nodded. Yeah, for now. A long silence stretched between them. The battle was over. The war, for now, was won. But somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, something even greater was watching. And humanity had just earned their attention.